I love my GH5. I reckon it's the most useful camera I've ever bought. It's certainly the most versatile. I mean, what else even today gives you 422 10-bit or 4K at 50p? But I think we all know it's got a problem, and that's autofocus. I've already made a couple of videos all about it. And then a couple of weeks ago, I got to try out the S1H, and I thought the autofocus on that was a lot better. Everybody told me it couldn't be because it's using the same system. It's a contrast-based autofocus system. But now I'm wondering if some of the tech from the S1H is working its way down to the latest firmware in the GH5. Are we all waiting for the GH6? Or is this the GH5.5? Now obviously, we're talking about updating the firmware in the GH5 to the latest version, version 2.6. And surprisingly, I've met quite a few people recently who seem nervous about updating the firmware in their own cameras. They seem to be worried about bricking the camera or doing some damage. It really doesn't have to be that difficult. Just follow these simple steps and you'll be done in a couple of minutes. Simply, make sure you've got a fully charged battery. Format an SD card inside the camera, turn the camera off, pop the card, and insert it into your computer. The firmware is easy to find. I'll put a link to the official Panasonic website in the video description above. Click through for the version you want and double check you've got the right one for your camera. Download it to the computer and then drag the firmware, that's the .bin file, into the root of the camera SD card you've still got in the computer. That's the top level. Just don't put it in any folders you might see there. Okay, eject the card from your computer and put it right back in the camera. Turn the camera on, just press the play button as if you want to look at some shots. And because there's nothing on the card but firmware, the camera will just start the version update process. Confirm you want to do it and check you've got a full battery and press yes. Now, the only thing to do now is not press anything. Just don't. No matter how long it takes, don't even think of touching the camera. Once it's done, your normal screen should reappear. Now at this point, it's probably a good idea to turn the camera off, give it a second, and then on again. Format the SD card to delete the firmware, and check your new version number. That wasn't so difficult, and I probably made it sound a lot more complicated than it really is. Now, before we look to see how good the latest firmware has made the autofocus, it might be worth rewinding and reminding ourselves how good the previous version I had, version 2.4, actually performed. This was using face detect, and there's no doubt that the autofocus has massively improved since the camera was first launched. But if we zoom into that light in the background, we can see we've still got an issue with pulsing. Things are definitely better using the one area square to fix the focus point, but we still see some vicious pulsing. So let's take a look at the latest firmware, version 2.6. Okay, this is one area with all the custom settings turned off, and I'm looking at the light to see if it's shimmering. Let's try facial tracking. Doesn't seem to want to lock on. Let's hold something up. There it is. So it does lock on eventually, and we're just looking at the light behind me while I'm talking. You can expect a little bit of movement in the background. I mean, it's bound to as the focus pulls, but it's when nothing moves. Does it shimmer when nothing moves? And on the face of it, this looks a little better. You can compare this with one area now. You've also got a new menu function with firmware 2.6 in that you can set the AF to AF near or AF far. So you would think that it would prioritize anything nearer to the lens than further away. Well, let's see. It does appear to be following my face. So let's try the different speed settings. Okay. So this is facial tracking with all the speeds maxed out. Gets there in the end, and it seems to work quite well. What if I don't move at all? Still got a bit of shimmering. Let's play with these settings and go the other way. Slow everything down. Now everything's slower. Can't say I can see a difference. Doesn't want to do it. But the shimmering is much better. Let's try a compromise setting. Well, that looks like a compromise. We've slowed the speed down and got the responsiveness up. That looks pretty good. The facial detect is definitely better than it was with firmware 2.4. Okay, let's try one more compromise. Right, everything's on -1. The speed and the responsiveness. Just waiting to see if that light shimmers. And it's not so bad. It's not the same every time. One more compromise. Well, that was good. That looked like it locked on quickly. It does get there. So it looks like it's good. But loads of pulsing. Maybe one area. Final go on one area. And that works much better. But of course, I have to put it in the box. So a little bit restricting. If just talking normally to camera and moving my head around a little bit without swinging around, how does that do? If I put the camera up in front of the square, that works. But I can't tell. I can't tell you how difficult it's been to make this video. I must have watched every single YouTube video there is about the autofocus settings on the GH5 and the best settings that people have found. They're all wasting your time. In fact, I'm wasting your time. I could sit here and tell you that the best speed setting is -2 and sensitivity setting is +1 because that's the best that I've found. But I'd be lying, because the performance of this autofocus system isn't repeatable. It's different every single time. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, even with the same setup. And the custom settings, that's a rabbit hole of hell that I wish I hadn't gone down, because you might as well work with custom settings off. It's just not reliable. Now, I do think that the facial recognition has improved a lot with this latest firmware, and that's really good for vloggers and people making films at home. But if you're a professional with a client looking over your shoulder, you need something that's repeatable and reliable every single time. And this autofocus system isn't it. Don't get me wrong, I love the GH5, but I think we all know what we want to see in the GH6. Thanks for watching, and I'm sorry if I've wasted your time.